And again, from FirEUrisk, Ramona Velea is going to present citizens' engagement in wildfire risk reduction. And this will bring us to the end of the first session, which is on wildfire management. And then we can open the floor for some questions, like 10 minutes questions. Furthermore, PyroLife, we're going to continue with the two of the PhD candidates from PyroLife program. First will be Judith Kirchner with title Governing Wildfires, Emerging Concepts and Challenges. And then with Mrs. Pooja Pandey for presenting interagency exchange in wildfire management. Both are actually PhD students in the European University Cyprus through the PyroLife program. And finally, by Joseph Tichidis will present the research done as part of FirEUrisk on the review of European fire management policies. And we're going to have another session of questions, which can include questions from the first and the second, let's say, section of presentations. Okay, let me just move on. I will ask you all to please have muted your microphones, and the questions to be done through the chat and the QA panel. Preferably, there is a QA box there. If you want to do it there, you cannot say, just go ahead and ask in the chat. And then myself and some others, Judith actually and Pooja, they will read through the question. And you can rewrite for if you need any clarification. Okay. So the host project for this webinar is FirEUrisk. And I'm going to show you, just to make it short, I'm going to show you our...
Threatening the societies, they can lead to ecological damage and loss of changes.
Earlier, we cannot see the video.
Can you hear it?
Yes, hear it, but can't see.
Yeah, I have to reshare the screen. I was trying this now. Thank you. Let's try this. Technical issues. And there. Okay, let's see. So this is a short video presenting our FirEUrisk project, or if anybody's not aware with it. Okay, let me know now.
Climate and land use changes, their extent and severity are increasing, posing great challenges in Europe and worldwide. The risk of a wildfire occurring depends on weather and fuel availability. Human drivers like accidents and arson, but also
we hear, but we cannot see. Just me.
Management strategies to enable effective wildfire which is necessary before a fire risk assessment facilitates negative FireLINKS.
I can see it. I can see it too. Yeah, I can see and hear as well.
Okay. Now I can see as well. Okay.
FirEUrisk addresses these by fully integrating physical and to existing to deliver a coordinated and science-based strategy for Europe fire management. Together, 38 partners from related sectors, from researchers to first responders and authorities. Supported by and scientists, they provide the knowledge necessary to co-design effective solutions, assess wildfire risk, give methods for estimating and communicating fire danger and vulnerability. These include satellite and airborne sensors, geospatial analysis, meteorological, socioeconomic To reduce fire risk, land management strategies will be evaluated to better manage fuel. A new near-real tool for predicting fire behavior will be produced for decision makers. Respond to evacuation planners. To enable adapting to future risk, high-resolution climate scenarios will be demographic, socioeconomic projections, as well as in policies. The resulting strategies will be sites and demonstration areas across Europe, all findings showcased via open access, valuable knowledge and tools for every stakeholder. With their work, FireLINKS partners aim to improve current wildfire features by providing science and management strategies towards a more resilient future for Europe and elsewhere.
Great. Let's now move to our first presenter, which is going to present actually FireLINKS. Jesus, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello,
Great.
everybody.
Hello. So do you want to present to us FireLINKS? Jesus is from University of Granada, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Great. Do you want to share your screen?
One moment. One moment. I don't know what happened.
Okay. This is the normal. You see the share screen? Jesus?
And now you see my presentation?
No, actually, we had a glimpse of it, but no, it's lost now. I'll try again.
Okay. One moment. I will try this. Just sharing. I mean, this is my camera, and now, so. And now?
Me, no, I don't see it.
Okay.
We don't see your camera either. If that's
Okay, I will try to leave and entry again. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe it's
okay.
much better. I don't know.
That's fine. So, okay. Let me see. In the meantime, Stefan, do you want to tell us a few words regarding FireLINKS, just on the progress and...
Actually, since we have the coordinator here, Artemi Seller, do you mind, Artemi, if I pass on to you? He's the main man behind FireLINKS, so I think he deserves a few words.
Of course, of course. Let me just make him right. Artemi, we cannot hear you. We still cannot hear you. Okay. Seems like Tim is not going to do us a favor today. Artemi. Can you hear us? We can see you, but not hear you. No.
Clelia, Jesus said
Yes.
he was coming out.
Yes.
He's gone.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We are.
Okay, I hope now I can share my
Okay.
screen. Now, theoretically, you can see my screen
Now, yes.
or not? Okay, that's great. And now my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So sorry, I don't know, but yeah.
No worries, no worries. Yeah.
Okay.
English is a must.
So thank you very much for this invitation. In along of the World Coast Action. The name is FireLINKS, Fire in the Air System. And my name is Jesus Rodrigo Comino. I am assistant professor at the University of Granada. And my main work here is I am the grant holder at our university in Granada in Spain. And I am explaining, I want to explain a little about how we are working with in our cost action, and also highlight the work that our community and also our chairman, Professor Artemis Cerdá, and vice chairman, Stefan Deur, are doing in this cost action. And the main question is maybe for people that they don't know what a cost action is. A cost action is a networking tool designed by the European Union in order to connect stakeholders and scientists, or practitioners and scientists, and in this case, in a specific topic related to forest fire. And the main idea is to connect communities from different scientific and geographic backgrounds, allowing discussions of different experience and emerging topics or approaches. These people are the main coordinators of this cost action, Professor Cerdá and Professor Deur. Professor Cerdá comes from University of Valencia, Spain, and Stefan Deur from Swansea, UK, and he will present after me. And in our cost action, we have 5 different working groups, depending on the topic that the people want to collaborate. For example, the working group number 1, we are working with fire modeling, and working group number 2, we are working with fire and biota. Number 3 is fire and soils. The 4 is related to hydrological processes, and the number 5 that I am coordinating is related to socioeconomic aspect and regional issues. Also, in this cost action and all the cost actions, we have the possibility to offer different grants, for example, the short-term scientific missions, that they are, for example, short stay in different universities in order to conduct short or small research, for example. And now Anna Brook is from University of Haifa, is our coordinator. And also we are trying to disseminate all our activities, and we also have a scientist communicator manager. These are examples of meetings organized in Sofia in Bulgaria, or in Norway, or we have already organized a meeting in Malaga. And now after the pandemic, we try to launch again all the in situ activities. For us, it's also very important, the social media, and we are trying to disseminate all our activities using our Twitter accounts, Facebook, and also our website. That's why here, if you want to receive more information, you can register in our webpage. Now I will show you. And also you can follow our Twitter account to receive more information, and also register for the newsletters every month or so, more or less. Also, we have the possibility to receive post of the month in order to share the community, the new activities made by other groups and other people related to forest fire research or activities or project. And now we are also open. We have an open call for funding publication in open access, and also we will organize a training school for young people, and also we inviting experienced trainers in order to show the people new specific topics related to forest fire research or management. And how can I participate? As I mentioned, you can register here in our website and just write in your email, your names, affiliation, and your interest. This is very important in order to put you in the correct working group, and then receive all the information related to our course action. During this year, we will have a lot of meetings. For example, now we will organize a meeting in Nice, in Serbia, in Wageningen, in Netherlands, in Prague, in Luxembourg, in Austria, and also the training school will be organized in Antalya, in Turkey, and also in Extremadura we will have the working group number 5 meeting. So you are totally invited to participate. Just register here, and then you will receive the newsletter with the links to be registered for the different meetings. And it is open for all the people that they want to participate, but just considering a gender and age balance, and also your affinity to the topic of this working group meeting. For example, this is the web page to register for the Wageningen meeting in the Netherlands in July, and also for the training school in Antalya in Turkey. We FireLINKS also is able to sponsor meetings related to forest fire, and in this case, FireLINKS will sponsor the second International Congress of Fire in the Air System that we will take place in Granada, in my university. And now we are open with a call for abstracts, and now we have a lot of sessions with different topics, and we will have different activities. For example, the first day we organize a pre-conference day, and the people can visit the Granada city and the Alhambra. It's one of the most beautiful monuments over the world. And the 5th and the 6th of July, we will have the in situ meeting in the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters in Granada, with the oral presentations, the posters, and also we will have enterprises showing the different tools, and also we will have wine and olive oil demonstrations and so on. And the next 2 days, we will have a post-conference, no? And FireLINKS is also sponsored these 2 field trips to pick forest fire occurred in Granada, close to the mountains, and also people, policymakers and stakeholders, will explain to us how they manage the fire and how we can collaborate with FireLINKS and so on. Here is the people that they are involved in the Congress, the registration fees, and how you can register for this meeting. And also we are organizing a couple of special issues. For example, in Cuadernos Geográficos is our university journal. It's open access, index it, and we will have impact factor, and it's for free. And also in this journal of Elsevier, it is for some people, and also all the papers published related to this Congress will be for free. And also this journal will get impact factor. And also we will open this special issue, the second one in Elsevier, for people that they want to publish something related to forest fire. Then when we finish the meeting, then the special issue will be also open for people that other projects or other topics, and in order to combine all the best publication and communication in our meeting in open access, and also with other community. And now also to finish, we want to explain our plan, and our submitted proposal in the cost action is the expansion and extension of the FireLINKS for the future, and it's the Global Fire Partnership. We will try to start with the European Fire Partnership if we get the extension of our cost action. And the main objective is continue with the family of FireLINKS. And the main idea is to expand to the rest of the world the main results and the main ideas related to impact research and impact policy of forest fire. The main idea is to contribute to prepare the society, practitioners and scientists to the intensification and geographical spreading of wildfires. Because now we all of us, now that we are suffering, we are affected by an unpredictable impact of climate change and land use changes by human. And the main idea is to increase the awareness of the worldwide inhabitants. And the main idea is to facilitate and to make much easier this dissemination across over the world. No? And also the main idea is to continue with the same working groups, fire dynamics, biota, water, soils and society, and then finishing, but dividing this into different regional groups in order to make broader this awareness and impact of the different topics related to forest fire. And now we are also open to receive ideas and people interested to join us. And we will launch this proposal and this potential idea during the meeting in Granada this July. And then if you are also welcome to come, and also you will see how we will try to launch this dream in order to share the main ideas related to forest fire. Also, if you want to collaborate, you can see the different websites where this information will be placed. Now, the main coordinator of this idea is Dr. Saskia Kestra, and you can mail her if you want to receive more information. And also on Twitter, we will have an account, and you can follow this dream, this idea, in order to see how the future, what the future says. So then, thank you very much for this invitation again from our college again also, and also now we are open to receive your questions, feedbacks, and messages if you need more information related to FireLINKS, the Global Fire Partnership, or the meeting that FireLINKS is a sponsor, Fire in the Air system in Granada.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you very much. That's very interesting, all the teams and work done by FireLINKS. Just to ask now, Artemi, do you want to add anything, since we were asking you also before? You should be, if there is no technical issue, of course. It's going to be the thing today, all the technical issues. Okay.
Yeah, but the microphone doesn't work.
I think, he's unmuted, but yeah, I think technical. Okay. Anything you want, if you want to write something on the chat, I will read it through. Or we try again. Okay, there is I'm very sorry for that. Okay, we can move on to Stefan in order to present the national perspectives of wildland fire partners and challenges in Europe, which I think is part of also a published paper, on behalf of FireLINKS. Okay.
Correct. I'm sharing my whole screen now. Can you see that?
Yes, confirm. We can see it. Please go ahead.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much. And also thanks to everybody for joining this morning. Thank you for your interest. My name is Stefan Deur from Swansea University, and I'm representing essentially one of the many outputs of FireLINKS. And as Jesus had already explained, this is a large network now of individuals, scientists, but also practitioners across Europe. So we have 31 countries in Europe represented. Now, FireLINKS doesn't have direct funding for research, unlike PyroLife or unlike FirEUrisk. But of course, it does facilitate meeting, workshops, training, and so on. And therefore, it provides an excellent opportunity to share ideas. And one of the outcomes of this is basically a paper which I say a little bit more about in a moment on current wildland fire patterns and challenges in Europe. But before I do this, I just want to give a sort of general overview. Some of the views that I'm presenting here have basically been distilled from the meetings that we've had with many of the FireLINKS participants. So we often faced with images like this. The public in particular sees wildfire as something like this, major events where people are hurt or being killed. And even practitioners and many scientists are, I would say, perhaps biased by these really terrible images, which of course we should do everything to avoid. This is really what the media portrays about fire, and this is how fire is perceived. And the Mediterranean countries, of course, are pivotal in this. They are the main countries that are affected by fire in Europe. So, for example, if we look at the fire season of 2022, that was particularly bad, but also now in 23, we had fires in Spain already. In Asturias, for example, we had extreme fires this year. So again, the Mediterranean features very strongly here. But we also have fires occurring in areas where traditionally we haven't seen that much fire, at least in recent years. So, for example, in Germany last year, in Sweden in 2018 in a very severe fire season, or also near London last year, where in the summer more than 60 houses were destroyed, which is an entirely unprecedented phenomenon, certainly in this and even the last century. Now, if we look at fires in Europe in general, of course, it's dominated by fire in the Mediterranean, and increasingly so by some fires elsewhere. But if you think of this globally, the fires in Europe, they represent only about 1% of the global area burned. So on a global scale, Europe is a minor player in terms of fire. Now, just to put this into perspective, also in terms of global fire, we don't really have extensive national vegetation zones in Europe, unlike the boreal zones, for example, the boreal forest. Europe has been intensively cultivated for millennia, so we've changed the land surface vegetation quite dramatically. The ignitions nowadays in Europe are largely dominated by humans, so mainly accidental and arson. We have lightning ignitions, but they are not the dominant ignitions, especially further north, but generally speaking, they are human ignitions. We don't really have, at least in extensive areas now, a national fire regime. It has long been absent. Again, if you compare this, for example, with the boreal forest, where we still, at least in some areas, have a national fire regime. Fire is also now rarely used in land management, at least in a formalized and legal way. So, for example, stubble burning, we can see here on the left, which is very, very common all across Europe, is now relatively uncommon and banned in most countries. And we also have very well developed firefighting, especially in the Mediterranean countries, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, very well developed firefighting capabilities. This is less so the case in the north, for example, Scandinavia, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, but people are catching up there as well. Now in Europe, and again, this is nothing new to most here in the seminar or in the webinar, is we've had a phenomenon which is almost unique to Europe. We've had rural depopulation in many areas, especially in the south, since the 1960s. So that meant we have more vegetation now compared to times when the landscape was heavily managed. So, for example, we've had now afforestation in many areas in Europe, especially in Spain and Portugal, with more flammable vegetation, so extensive conifer plantations, and in some areas also eucalypts that have been introduced from Australia, not only to Europe, but South Africa, Chile, Argentina, in the last century. And of course, that makes for a more flammable landscape, as we can see here in this image from north central Portugal. But again, as I said earlier, we also have increasingly effective firefighting. So generally speaking, we are now quite good at suppressing fires when they are detected early enough. This ultimately has led to an extensive fuel accumulation. So at least compared to the last, I would say about 2000 years or so, much of Europe is now more flammable than it has been before, even if we don't consider the effect of climate change. Now, if we look at the trends in fire in Europe, you would perhaps think that fire has increased across Europe in the last few decades because of these land use changes and because of climate change. But generally speaking, the total area burned has stayed relatively static, and in fact, it actually has reduced slightly by 3.8% in the Mediterranean over the last 20 years or so. Now, that's not to say that we don't have a problem at all. Of course, we do have a problem with fire, and we have an increasing problem in some areas with fire. So, for example, given that we only represent 1% of the global area burned, we have a third of the global fatalities in fires in Europe. So, for example, the Mati wildfires, the Greece Peloponnese fires, Portugal wildfires in 2017, well, 2 sets of wildfires, and also in Spain, many fatalities have occurred. So you might be thinking, well, if we have really good firefighting and the area burned is not increasing, what is going on? And of course, one of the reasons is that the fires that are burning tend to become larger, and also the fires are burning more severely. Now, there are different perspectives on this, but coming back to FireLINKS now, the fact that we had 31 countries represented with scientists and practitioners, that allowed us to basically harness and gather the opportunities of those individuals across Europe. What is the view of fire in particular countries? So the paper was led by Nives, who was mentioned here before. She's one of the working stream leaders. And I have to say, Jesus, who introduced FireLINKS, I think it was his idea to actually gather those views across Europe. So a big thank you to Jesus to do this. And this is basically led to a review article which doesn't necessarily review fire in a way where we have all the facts across all the countries. We have other reports that do this, but this is more a perspective of scientists, but also firefighters and practitioners in different countries. And I'd just like to give you some examples of the outputs. But yeah, let's start with the aim actually first. So, I mean, here you see the list of authors, a very extensive list of authors. And the aim is to have a general overview of the diverse wildland fire patterns and challenges across 31 countries in Europe. And to give a perspective, it's in some cases a relatively personal perspective from a wide range of disciplines and backgrounds. We also focus on notable fire events. These are being mentioned, and we provide national fire statistics where they are available for the period of 2009 to 2018 for each of the countries. So this is perhaps for some of you more interesting than some of the other perspectives in this. So in the supplementary material, you find a table with either, if it's data here from EFIS, San Miguel Alliance, so this would be EFIS data for area burns, for example, for Bulgaria, but then you have other areas, or other countries, Croatia, for example, here. We have the statistic from the Firefighters Association. For Cyprus, we actually have a mix of both. So you can see the statistics of wildland fires in terms of maximum, minimum size, and also the mean for all the countries that have been involved. And then there is a synthesis of those characteristics, the perceived challenges, and suggestions for future research directions. I'd just like to give you a few examples from those, and I'm focusing on those that you might be, perhaps some of the people who are attending today are less familiar with. So I'll give you an example from Finland. Finland, we obviously have wildland fires in Finland. The boreal forest, got about 75% of Finland is covered by boreal forest, which has naturally a surface fire regime, but in Finland the forest is highly managed. The area burned is actually far less now than it was in the last century. What is occurring are low intensity surface fires, and they usually do not spread very far, partially because the landscape is basically partialized into individual plots with good fire breaks. So generally speaking, at least that was the perception from the contributors to the study, that there isn't a perceived fire problem, and perhaps there isn't even enough fire in Finland now to maintain a healthy ecosystem. The average fire size is less than a hectare, so it's quite remarkable. And you might remember the fires a few years ago in the campfires in the United States, where Trump referred to the Finns, that they are raking their forests. And this is why they don't have a problem, and the people in California should be raking their forests as well. Now, of course, the Finns disagree. It's not quite like that, but there were a lot of funny comments on Twitter, like this one, for example. That's what the Finns do on their weekends. They're hoovering the forest to prevent forest fires. Now, interestingly, if we move across to Sweden, which is also boreal forest right next to Finland, the situation is rather different. There are also large areas of managed forest, Well, also low intensity surface fires are normal in this area, but in 2014 and 2018, we had some major fires across Sweden. Especially in 2018, the firefighting capabilities across Finland, across Sweden were basically exhausted. So international help was necessary. And if we look at the average size, for example, the maximum is over 11,000 hectares. The mean is over 250, roughly 250, whereas in Finland, it was less than half a hectare. It's quite remarkable in terms of fire, if you look at these two countries that are so closely related. There are a number of reasons for this, of course, but one clearly may be a stronger effect of climate, especially the drought in 2018 and 14 here compared to Finland. So this relatively small difference here in location, it may still lead to a significant difference in terms of climate, but the exact reasons are actually not that well understood. So again, if you compare this to Finland here, just to give you an example, 0.56 at a maximum fire size compared to 11,000 hectares, so a huge difference. Now let's move to Iceland. I'm not sure if many of you have heard about fire in Iceland. If you think of Iceland, you think of waterfalls and glaciers and a lot of rain. So is it actually burning in Iceland? I didn't know anything about this, but we had a contributor from Iceland in FireLINKS. And of course, there are fires in Iceland, not very many, but we have an average size of fires, of course, not very many, 5 fires over that period of 150 hectares. So that's larger than the average size in Finland. Now, initially, since Iceland was settled, we had a lot of reduction of forest and shrub cover, so from about 40% to less than 2% nowadays. But there have been recent grass and peatland fires, and they coincide with increased biomass, interestingly, due to global warming. So we have a greening of Iceland due to a warming climate, but also reduced grazing, and of course, human ignitions from much higher population density in the summer. If we move on to the United Kingdom, where I'm based in Wales. Of course, some of you are familiar with this, but others might think, well, this is what firefighters do in the United Kingdom. They do flood rescue because it rains a lot. But of course, that's not the whole story. We do have fires. We actually have a lot of fires in UK. Here in the statistics, we only have 79 fires mentioned, but these are the fires from EFIS, larger than 30 hectares. We have thousands of fires in the UK every year, but many of those are very small. They're mainly heathland, grassland, and cropland fires, some forest, but we haven't really had any extensive crown fires as yet, but there is a concern that this will occur. We essentially have no natural ignitions. We are too Atlantic for dry lightning ignitions to occur. At least we have no known fire ignitions from lightning or wildland fire ignitions from lightning. But we had major fire seasons, for example, in 2018, just like Sweden, but also in 2022, which I mentioned earlier, where more than 60 houses were destroyed from fires. We have some very good firefighting capabilities in some areas, especially here in South Wales, where I'm based, but also we have some areas where there's relatively little experience, training, and equipment when it comes to fighting fires. That's especially the southeast, which has been so strongly affected by fires in 2022. I'd just like to dive a little bit deeper in terms of my area here in South Wales, because it's rather unusual and it gives a rather different picture that may be comparable with some fires in the Netherlands, but certainly very different from what you see in the Mediterranean. If we look at our fire detections here, these are satellite detections, monthly detections. Basically, we can see that we have the main fire peak here in South Wales at the end of the winter and into early spring, and then in the summer it peters out. And we also have variations over the years, but we have a clear increasing trend here over the last 20 years or so, sorry, over the last 10 years or so. And the reason for this is that the spring fire season is that this is what it looks like here in the uplands. This used to be grazing areas, not grazed very much anymore. You can see a lot of dry grass. The grass will be wet as soon as it's raining, but we have some periods, perhaps a week or two, where it doesn't rain, and then this becomes really, really flammable. Whereas in the summer, most of the landscape is green. So we don't really have fires in the summer, except under exceptional circumstances like we've had in 2018. And that contrasts if we go to the London area, for example. Of course, we have much drier conditions in the summer where we have cropland fires. But here in Wales, the situation is definitely dominated by a late winter, early spring peak, and then perhaps another peak in the summer, but only if we have dry summers. And that doesn't happen too often, I can assure you. Now, what does the future bring for Europe? Now, of course, we're already aware of the changing climate. So there have been some suggestions that fires in the Mediterranean, for example, will increase by 40% at 1.5 degrees of warming. Sorry, and we're essentially nearly there at 1.5 degrees of warming. So there's clearly an increased fire risk. And if you just look at the weather conditions that promote extreme fire, so extreme fire weather as of the fire weather index, if we look at the Mediterranean countries, for example, we have here the climate models basically in terms of what has happened to the fire weather index. And this is actually the line here, the pink line is actual observations. So the observations that we've had based on ERA data actually demonstrates we already have a steeper increase in the extreme fire weather already observed compared to what climate models have predicted. And if you look at various countries across Europe, for example, here, Austria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, most countries, Bulgaria, we have an increase in days of extreme fire weather. There are some, Finland, for example, has seen a reduction. That may explain perhaps also some of the aspects that we discussed earlier in Finland not having such a fire problem yet. But generally speaking, across Europe, we see more days each year with extreme fire weather conditions. So if you want to have a further look, a colleague of mine, Matt Jones, has actually put this data set together, and you can actually look up your own country if you want under this link of what the change in fire weather conditions is predicted to do and what has already happened. Just give you one quick example in terms of fire weather, the extreme fires in Germany, which really took the nation, but also internationally, people by surprise. The fire weather index, for example, in Germany during the extreme fires we've seen last summer was 85. And this is completely unprecedented. The highest level ever observed, at least as long records exist, is 69. This is a major jump in fire weather index. So for an area in Central Europe, this has been a massive problem. And we're expecting this to recur in the future and to get worse. So fire weather is a main problem, of course. Now let's jump back to the synthesis and the challenges that we see for Europe. Some of these are covered in the synthesis paper. It's obviously freely available, so anyone can download it. And some of these are concepts and discussions that came about from FireLINKS meetings. So of course, with climate change, as I've just shown, we have increasingly extreme fire weather. We also know that we've had land use change across Europe, which in most areas increases vegetation fuel. There are, of course, some areas where we have a decrease in vegetation. This is especially in built-up areas, of course, but also in areas where maybe we have a conversion of flammable cropland into other areas that is fallow, but it really depends on the area looking at. We know that we have an increasingly extreme fire behavior in many areas. We also know that fire is becoming more common in some areas where we haven't really seen it that much. For example, in the Netherlands, in Germany, northern France has seen very extreme fires last summer. And of course, we also have population growth in many areas. So we have a rural depopulation in the Mediterranean, but we also have population growth in many other areas that are surrounded by flammable vegetation. So we have increases in potential ignitions. We also have an increase in human exposure in many areas. And of course, this is a recipe for, unfortunately, further death in Europe. So this is something we obviously need to face. So, and as I said earlier, fire now increasingly affects areas where fire has been historically rare. And that's not just in Europe, especially in the north, but of course, other places around the world as well. Now, firefighting has long been a focus for policymakers instead of preventative landscape management across Europe. And I think the speakers later on will cover this in much more detail. But I'd just like to highlight that the firefighting, or rather the change from focus on firefighting to preventative landscape management is also focus of FireLINKS, FirEUrisk, and also forthcoming OECD report that will be launched at the 8th International Wildfire Conference in Porto on the 18th of May. So if you are attending that conference, I encourage you to come to the launch of this report. And with this, I just thank everybody here and of course all the participants of FireLINKS. Overall, we have a community of over 300 individual FireLINKS, so it's a great resource to tap into to get a broad perspective of fire across Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. Wow, very interesting. I did actually also make a note about the link for the fuels. yeah, I'm very interested to see if Cyprus is included on that, because sometimes it has been.
It is. So yeah, as far as I know, all the countries in Europe are included.
Great, amazing. Just to remind everybody, if you have any questions, go to the Q&A box. I haven't checked in a while. I will see. I think we have successful Artemi. Let's see.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I think I was muted by you or by the system, because I was not. I was only. Well, I was trying to give Stefan and Jesus the role to show what we are doing. Just to thank all of you for the invitation, and Jesus and Stefan for the good presentations. Just to tell one thing, what we are facing with the fire issue in the world, not only in Europe, is that we have many different opinions, many different views from different actors of the society. Firefighters, they clearly are telling us that they cannot fight against fire in the circumstances that we have now in many parts of Europe, because the fires are really dangerous now. Many firefighters are telling me, we were trained to fight against the fire, not to save life of people from the houses, and we don't have any option to stop the fires that we have now, especially in the Mediterranean. But at the same time, we have some other part of the society that don't want to interfere with the natural recovery of the forest in many parts of Europe. In education, the term fire is used always in a negative way. Meanwhile, farmers or shepherds, they have used forever the fire. Then the task of FireLINKS in our meetings is to bring all these actors to the platform and to show what is their opinion, and to try to find public general European opinion, which still is very difficult. This is because the Global Fire Partnership is going to be developed just to keep going in this direction, and to try to show that fire is part of nature, but also fire is a risk, and we need to protect citizens, and we need to plan our land in a proper way, with the view that fire will be present. This is very important, and still the European society is not aware of this. In the Mediterranean, we are more aware because it's more recurrent, the fire. But in Central Europe, in Western and Eastern Europe, the situation is not going to be better in the next years, and we need to collaborate also between different regions. Okay. Then this is because the talk of Stefan with this paper is very important, that to show that fire is present everywhere. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Artemi. Thank you. Very briefly, your comments, but very important as well. It's exactly what we are facing in the Southern Europe for a while now. The North is starting to experience as well. And through my experience living a bit in the UK, is many national parks, many, let's say, forest type of areas are very near to the urban areas. So that will affect even more people living nearby if there's no actions taken, like yesterday, I would say. It's very urgent. Great. Let's move on to Kiki Unadi from Safe Cluster, and Aspar to present us her work done so far. Let's remember that this is preliminary results, outcomes showing from work package 2 of FirEUrisk, which the main title is Risk Reduction to Improve Protection. And Kiki is a master's student in PSL FF France, and her major target is forest fire management. Okay, Kiki, can you share your screen?
Okay, Clelia. Could you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh,
Go ahead.
wait, it's not in the beginning.
I was going to say number 5. Okay. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Clelia. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity given to me. My name is Kiki Nianti, and I currently work in the work package 2 in FirEUrisk, especially in the task 2.3.3 about the curricula for extreme fires and fire in wetland user interface. And today I will present the results of a survey that has been conducted on the screening of best practices to fight extreme fires in European countries. So the reason we conducted this survey is because in this task 2.3.3, we will create a curriculum for firefighters to face extreme fires and fires in WUI. And to formulate this curriculum, we will gain insight from literature studies, as well as from the tasks or work package, another work package in the FirEUrisk, such as fire future predictions and extreme fire behavior. And here we are now conducting a survey to find out the strategy that being used in the countries, in European countries to combat forest fires. And then after the survey, we will also conduct interviews with experts or high-level firefighters, and also we will conduct focus group discussion. Next. So we conducted this survey for 3 weeks from early April until the 3rd week of April, using an online questionnaire with closed and open questions. The focus of the questions is on the strategies used in the initial attack, fires in wetland user interface, and the extreme fires. And during the 3 weeks, we received responses from 25 people from 10 countries, Spain, Italy, France, Portugal, Croatia, Greece, Ireland, Russia, Germany, and South Africa, even though it's not from Europe, but I think it's still, we can get like available insight from them. And the respondents who participate in these surveys are firefighters who come from various organizations, such as voluntary fire department, municipality fire department, regional fire department, national, and others such as firefighters from NGOs and others. So here's the result for the strategies in initial attack. For the strategies such as aerial means, 23 respondents said they use that, but 2 respondents said they don't use that because here is in Germany that they said that they're in the planning of aircraft contracts, and in Ireland, because these respondents coming from the Northern Ireland, so the aerial means only available in the national or Irish Republic. And for the pre-positioning strategy, mostly respondents said they use it, but there are 5 respondents said they don't use the pre-positioning strategy because it is not in the mind of the fire department yet, this strategy, and because of the flexibility and limited access, so they don't use this strategy. For the we also want to know if they have a dedicated teams for fighting fires in remote locations, 8 respondents said that they don't use that because they have like a well-connected region and no remote location in their regions. They have high population density index, and that's for the dedicated teams in remote location is the responsibility for the regional these respondents coming from the national agency. And for early detection technology, most of them said they use satellite imagery analysis, air patrol, and camera or video surveillance. And because we have like open questionnaire, so we asked maybe you have another strategy to fight fire in a national attack. We get some insight from Spain, like they use spatial tractor and defensive strategy, terrestrial media, direct attack and land attack, of course, and firefighters air transports. In Portugal, they said they do quick reactions, rifle at the intervention sites, and counter fire. And this is in South Africa. They have a regulation that obligate every landowner who's properly can catch fire to be able to put out the fire. And this is the result for the strategy to fight fires in wildland-user interface. Most of them said that they don't have dedicated tactics to face fire in the wildland-user interface. So they use the same strategy as they use in the initial attack. But for those who said they have a dedicated tactics, like in Spain, the evacuation strategy and multiple lines, previous vulneration and critical points detection, attack. Oh yeah, this is the interesting one. They said that attack the wildfire, let the fire impact on the first line of houses and defend the houses inside the wildland-user interface. And then also they also use semi-autonomous teams and horizontal evacuations, lockdown strategy, aerial operations, same as the initial attack, and suppressions of garden vegetations. So maybe I will not read all of them. For the special equipment to face fires in the wildland-user interface, mostly said that they don't have a special equipment. But for those who said yes, they have like a light truck to the interface area. And dedicated training, some of them said that there is a simulation and training in the wildland-user interface area in Spain. And in Croatia, they have training about landing from the helicopters. And this is strategy for fight extreme fires, which is most of them use back burning. 16% of them said they don't use it because of the legal constraints in Rome and Dubrovnik, if I'm not mistaken. This is from Croatia. And also in Germany, they said that stakeholders are in the early stage of understanding the need to do so. And another dedicated strategy for extreme fires in Spain, they said that they use combination of all maneuvers, especially long terms, more than 8 hours, air control and desert machine, iron, and analysis tactics. In Croatia, they have camera for fire detections and spread monitoring, drones for aerial fire surveillance. And in Italy, they do resource augments. They put like more air tankers, more people to extend attack, but it is not effective. And in South Africa, they increase the capacity of the incident management teams and invoke agreements between authorities. This is another question that we ask is whether they have fire analysis capabilities, and most of them said that they have fire analysis capabilities such as Campbell prediction system. In Italy, they select more than 200 people to of the professional forest corps. And then this is in Spain. They have a special team for fire analysis with the advanced analysis capability. In Croatia, they use fire propagator, and yeah, most of them has the fire analysis capability. And for the training, in Ireland, they join Wildline course delivered in Catalonia and course run by the Northumberland Fires and Rescue Service. In Italy, training using prescribed fire in field simulations, sand table, and so on. And also in Spain, they have us like simulations. And for the safety procedures, some of them use LACES protocol, safety zone and self-protection maneuvers, and OACL protocol. This is from Spain, if I'm not mistaken. And we also want to know the firefighters' perspective regarding the effectivity of the strategy that they has been used. So in initial attack, most of them said this is effective, and some of them said the strategy is highly effective. And for the fires in wildland urban interface, the strategy used is also effective. Most of them said effective, but 8 of the respondents said it's natural. But in extreme fires, like 12 respondents said it's natural, and rough 5 respondents said it's ineffective, and 1 person said it's very ineffective. And so is the conclusions for the initial attack. The majority of European countries included in the survey have the same strategy for firefighters, although there are some difference in certain regions, such as the aerial means. And most respondents felt that the strategies used in initial attack were effective within the first hours of their the fires. And for the fires in wildland urban interface, most respondents said that the region did not have the specific strategy for dealing with wildland urban interface, and the strategy used was similar to that of the initial attacks. And most respondents felt that the techniques they used in dealing with wildland urban interface fires were effective. And for the extreme fires, most respondents used the backing fire techniques, although some areas did not use the technique due to the legal constraints. And mostly has fire analysis capability to predict fires. And the majority of respondents choose to remain neutral regarding the effectiveness of their strategies. And some even state that their strategies were ineffective or very ineffective. Maybe that's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiki. Very interesting, the responses especially. And I can imagine the constraints and the difficulties on receiving all this and contacting people. Okay, shall we move? I suggest to move to our next presentation and final for this thematic, which is the wildfire management. And then I can, if there are no questions so far, but if there are any questions, please go ahead and write them on the Q&A box. So for now, I welcome Ramona Velea from ICIG, another partner of FirEUrisk, and she's going to present citizens' engagement in wildfire risk reduction as part of the work done in the project and work package 2 as well. Ramona, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Clelia. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Hope you can see my shared screen and you can hear my voice loud and clear, hopefully. Clelia, can I get okay on this?
Okay. Yes, great.
Okay,
screen and
Even
voice.
that perfect. Even that I'm sharing, I am not able to see anybody, but I can imagine all of you. Thanks, Clelia. Thanks to all my colleagues and previous speakers. Very rich morning of contents. I'm sure all of you have many questions addressed to them, so I will try to keep this last part of this first session as short as possible, so to proceed with the Q&A. My name is Ramona Velea. Indeed, I represent the Institute of International Sociology of Gorizia, ISIG. In Italy, we are one of the many partners of the FirEUrisk consortium, but I think that we are among the few social scientists on board, and this makes us particularly proud and very happy to contribute to this very important research project. As you could all see within the first presentation of the project, the video that Clelia shared with us, FirEUrisk project is very much concerned with integrating social aspects and trying to foster engagement of citizens, of communities, of stakeholders as well, in all the strategies that we are trying to build. So this puts us in a very enthusiastic, let's put it like this, very interesting position to be able to work in this field and combine our expertise in participation and promoting engagement in decision-making processes within the line of wildfire risk reduction. This is exactly what I will try to present very briefly to you. First, we would like to illustrate a bit what are the pillars upon which we are contributing to this research project, just mentioning the importance of participatory research and the citizen scientist approaches which our project promotes. Also, we would like to stress the need for increased engagement of communities, and by communities we intend both citizens but also stakeholders within these communities. And finally, we will propose the FirEUrisk participatory model, which is currently developed and starting to be implemented. Let's say that most of our engagement activities at local level in pilot sites of our project are going to be developed in the second phase of the project. So for now, we have only preliminary results and some initiation of application of these engagement activities. But nevertheless, I hope this will be interesting food for thought for you and for debate later on. So with no further ado, let me introduce a bit the framework for participatory research and citizen scientists. I am sure you are all familiar with these participatory approaches to research, action research, let's put it like this, which tries to emphasize the participation and actions of the members of communities that are to some extent affected by the research itself or by the phenomenon that the research focuses on. And this is what we are trying to promote across the FirEUrisk project in many research activities, trying to have the engagement of, yes, citizens, but as we were saying earlier, stakeholders as well that represent fire risk reduction universe, at least within our pilot sites, in order to grasp their perception in order to grasp their very important knowledge, and especially not only expert knowledge represented also by scientists and practitioners, but local knowledge, which is fundamental when we are trying to develop sustainable strategies at community level in combating, let's say, counteracting or reducing the wildfire risk. Now, we are, as many of fellow researchers right now, trying to experiment different co-creation approaches to our research. This will show later on within the engagement activities quite clearly. Our intention and ambition within the project is to co-create and co-produce significant strategies within pilot sites with communities and local stakeholders. This, however, as you will see, and I'm sure further presentation would illustrate that, is a bit of a fil rouge within our research project, as end users are constantly engaged in many research and more technical activities. So to make sure that whatever we produce stems from indeed the requirements, the needs of end users and communities, and even more so that it resonates in itinere, but also at the end of our project. So this goes as well for the citizens engagement framework that we are promoting with this little activity I am talking about in work package 2. But again, just to say that FirEUrisk is quite attentive to engagement and co-creation frameworks. Now, this idea of strengthening engagement of local communities and citizens, but also stakeholders and expert stakeholders, I am sure you are all very familiar with, and it resonates ever more with policy frameworks that are available. And in the next 2 minutes, I hope we will be able to illustrate a bit why there is a need to engage ever more stakeholders and citizens in this kind of activities, and also hopefully to suggest a way in how to proceed to that. Talking about policy frameworks, engagement and focus at local level and on communities was quite present since the release of the Sunlight Framework, which I believe we are all familiar about, and is ever more present and acknowledged as well by European, if you want, policy frameworks. And the European Union disaster resilience goals, I believe they are one of the most recent examples in this sense. As I'm sure you are all familiar, these European Union disaster resilience goals, which were expected for some time, were finally released at the beginning of this year. And you can see throughout the 5 main goals and targets that they enunciate, the importance of engagement of citizens and directing of attentions towards citizens, communities, and stakeholders all together. So this is just to make a bit of a reference to the fact that it's not only research that wants to go closer to the field, but the policy, rightfully so, top down, if you want, also tries to facilitate and encourage this kind of approach that we are taking with our FirEUrisk project. Now, what is the approach? What are the main components, if you want, and why do we want to pursue this type of engagement in our project? And generally, when we are talking about risk reduction, in this case, wildfire, but not generally, I would say disaster risk reduction. Well, first of all, as I was saying at the beginning of this presentation, there is a need for us scientists, but also for communities, to integrate as much as possible in the instruments, in the strategies that we are producing or developing, that local knowledge that actually makes a difference when we want to make relevant strategies and supporting tools and products in trying to reduce the wildfire risk. In our project, in many of these activities, you will see a very broad approach to research, but also that is always complemented by interactions with stakeholders from a specific pilot site, but also from the scientific community or practitioner community even more so. So to make sure that we actually respond to local need and we integrate that local knowledge that sometimes might be lost when we look at things from the space of the satellites, or as a sociologist, I can say this, when we look at data which come mainly from statistics databases. Local is very important, so to able to personalize strategies, especially when we want to focus on a specific region. And as you know, FirEUrisk dedicates its attention to many different regions, only 5 pilot sites, but many other demonstration areas across Europe. We want to consider definitely the local needs and capacities and try to capitalize it as much as possible on latent resources at local level. And we are doing this quite directly and straightforward within this project. You'll see later on, but I will anticipate a bit about this participatory model that we are producing. We want to create citizen scientist network. This is how we call them. They are core groups of stakeholders in our pilot sites that become a bit the multipliers and the link between the research efforts and the ambition to put those research efforts into application and give them the sustainability at local level. So by activating latent resources, we also think of stakeholders which might be volunteers, associations in our pilot site that can join forces and become partners of official practitioners that are dealing with wildfire risk reduction frameworks. Lastly, but not for sure less important, the idea of cooperating, of engaging communities and local stakeholders definitely resonates with our ambition of ensuring that the strategies that we produce for wildfire risk reduction resonate with criteria such as being useful in a specific context, being relevant for that context, being owned by whomever should then implement this kind of strategies. And for sure, we want to think to sustainability matters. Now, going closer to our participatory model, why is participation an added value, and what do we understand by participation and engagement within our project? Well, here on the screen, you will see 2 logos. One represents my institute, but the most important logo here, besides the European Commission, of course, and the project logo, which is FirEUrisk, would be the Council of Europe. Now, as a SIG, we have been working closely for the past decades with the Council of Europe, which is yet another and a bit bigger European institution, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, on thematics of participation and supporting mainstreaming of participation in decision-making process. So within this proposal of participatory model for FirEUrisk, we are also taking into consideration this wider framework of participation. What does participation mean? When we think about decision-making, and decision-making might be linked to governance systems of municipalities, regions, provinces, but it also might be referred in this case to decision-making of different practitioners and operators in the disaster risk reduction on the field. So this is why I would like to stress the fact that when we talk about decision-making, it's not ultimately only on the policymaker, on no matter, regardless of the level of governance, but we also work with this approach when we discuss with civil protection, with firefighters, so on and so forth. So going back to participation and added value and the Council of Europe framework, well, basically the idea and the definition is that civil participation means the engagement of citizens, civil society at large, NGOs in decision-making processes by public authorities. As I said, this should not be limited to public authorities only on governance aspects, but also for what concerns the reduction and fighting the wildfire risk. Now, this is just to stress some important aspects of our participatory framework, which, as I said, resonates with that of the Council of Europe. First, when we discuss of participation, we do not imagine only one event, one workshop, one citizens assembly, or you name it. Participation and engagement of citizens and stakeholders should follow all the different phases and steps of the decision-making process. And in this regard, and connecting it to our work within FirEUrisk, it should definitely follow all the moments within the disaster risk management cycle, which I'm sure you're more aware of them than myself. What is that implied is that we don't think of citizens only as potential spontaneous volunteers in case of a disaster, which we know it's quite difficult to manage, but we need to prepare that moment of the disaster, the aftermath of disaster. So consider engaging throughout all the cycles, especially not exclusively, but especially in prevention and preparedness. So as I said, participation does not mean a one-time event. It is a culture, it is a cycle, and it should follow all the phases of intervention when building policies, strategies that aim to counteract the wildfire risk. How do we do that? And this is where I'm going to illustrate briefly the model we are proposing with our project. Well, first of all, we start from selecting the right actors. When we talk about regions, provinces, municipalities, no matter the sphere in which we are focusing on, there is always a matter of selecting the right actors. When we hear about citizens' engagement or citizens' participation, that does not necessarily imply that we need to engage everybody at all times of these cycles that I was mentioning, decision-making or disaster risk management cycle, in the same time with the same instruments. What does that mean? Informing is a very important part of engagement, but it's not only that. Engagement is not only delivering information. So in order to make sustainable and efficient any participatory or engagement frameworks, there is the need of identifying what are those relevant stakeholders to be included. This goes for a municipality where we can look at different types of stakeholders, such as representatives of associations, more technical representatives from firefighters or different operators. But even if we are looking at small villages or different parts of the city, we can look at leaders of community, which might be not represented by an association or something that is very structured and has a statute, but that person or that actor, that stakeholder has the acknowledgement and the recognition of a piece of the population to which we want to address. So the idea is selecting in a structured way using criteria, and I will explain how we are doing that, but very shortly, the right stakeholders for them to create these core groups, if you want, these multipliers. We are here referring to scientists, citizen scientist networks in FirEUrisk that become a sort of an informal partnership that can support, in our case, practitioners and researchers in putting the basis of sustainable strategies to reduce wildfire risk. What does that mean? So the process we are trying to embed here is selecting actors, trying to personalize as much as possible based on the situation at pilot site level engagement strategies, establish this kind of partnership, and then go to engagement activities, because engagement activities will not focus only on this, let's say, informal partnership that we want to create at local level, but with their support, we are going to reach out to the entire communities. What for? Well, to strengthen capacities, to raise awareness, ultimately to co-produce these strategies, because I guess we all know, if we are part of a process, we feel that we own that process. So the same goes for fighting or reducing the wildfire risk. If citizens, if communities are engaged in this process, then it's more likely, and this is not just me or our experience as sociologists, but also recent studies, the experience shows that they will be more equipped, more motivated in listening to all the advices that the civil protection or the firefighters are always distributing, and thus being part and not passive actors within this, let's say, resilience building, if you want, at local level. Now, going to our small activity within Work Package 2, as my colleague Lelia introduced, the objective here is that of analyzing the potentialities to develop participatory approaches, so to involve citizens, as I was saying, in fire risk reduction, and increase overall resilience through preparedness. This is the official objective that we have with this little task. Now, in terms of activities that we carried out or we are carrying out currently, we started, like most of researchers, by refreshing all the knowledge that we already had with a literature review. But the most important part of our work, and this you can see on the screen, the different steps that we are envisaging in our work, is what I already mentioned. So we want to perform, we are in the process of stakeholder mapping and analysis, both at pilot sites, but also especially we are far advanced with one demonstration area, which I'm going to illustrate in just a minute. But even more so, besides all the backstage things that we are going to do with our partners, the important aspect or output, if you want, of our work would be definitely a personalized engagement plan for each of the pilot sites in which we are going to carry out this work, and also guidelines. Why do we need guidelines? Well, because as we said, we are very focused on providing sustainability to this kind of intervention. So we are going to experiment to learn for sure with the different pilot sites, many aspects, but then we would like to mainstream this and consolidate it into guidelines that would then be there at the disposal of other parts of Europe or other research projects that would like to approach wildfire risk reduction strategies within this participatory approach that we are doing. The model that we are proposing here, as I was already mentioning, is based on the framework of the Council of Europe on a specific toolkit, which proudly so we developed at IFIG, which is called Civil Participation in Decision Making. The idea here, which is adapted for the purpose of our project, is that of starting off by a community evaluation, and in this we are for sure in contact with the different pilot sites, so to understand what is the propensity to participation in that community. We look at different indicators, but it's more of a qualitative approach in understanding how is that community prone towards engagement activities or not. In this, we know that the Portuguese and some of the demonstration areas, such as the one I'm going to, the Portuguese pilot site here, and one of the demonstration area, they are quite advanced and prone to cooperate. But as we heard also from different inputs in the morning, other areas, other localities or countries, if you want, do not have this culture of cooperation and engagement. This is an important part. So to be able then to personalize the action plans, engagement action plans for all the pilot sites, and then of course try to mainstream it, generally upscale it. But anyhow, the idea of trying to focus first on the community is essential. So to gain on that local knowledge, as I was mentioning, so to know what works best in that specific context. I won't go through the different steps of the model, but just very quickly know that the main parts of it would be community evaluation. Here we have a series of interventions such as interviews, focus groups that will help us gather important aspects, important inputs on 4 dimensions with which we look at the participation within a community, or I say community, but it might be a region, it might be a province, so on and so forth. And that would be, you know, the four capitals we are all familiar with: social, economic, political, and human. Then we go to identifying the stakeholders that we want to include. Again, here we are working mainly with institutional actors, civil society, private actors, and of course, a special branch in this case in between institutional and sometimes civil society are definitely volunteers, also practitioners from different disaster management actors. Once we have identified it, we are analyzing the different stakeholders within a community. We look at variables related to interest and relevance. Won't go into the detail of that. So to then put them on a map. And this is a very different map than the ones we've seen in the morning. This is a map of stakeholders, which guides us through 4 different levels of participation, thus of modalities, 4 different ways in which to engage stakeholders based on the results of the previous analysis. Won't go into the details, but just for you to know, information is the lowest level of intensity of participation. So that's why I said to begin with, information is not engagement. It is just one part, fundamental, but it is not enough to promote engagement. Then we have consultation, dialogue, and partnership. If you're interested to know what these labels stand for, these levels of intensity of participation, I am all yours in the discussion part, but I'm afraid I am a bit behind schedule here. So just for you to know, based on the map and the levels of intensity of participation, what we are able to produce, and you will see in a bit the example from Sardinia, is a guided way through which we can promote engagement in a specific context, in a specific duration, period of time. That could be, for instance, our second part of the FirEUrisk project. So there are different ways, different methodologies. The idea is it's not enough to produce one event, and it's not enough to replicate that type of engagement methodology, be it a questionnaire, be it an information letter, focus group, you name it. It's not enough to have one, and it's not enough in order to make it sustainable to work with everybody in the same time. We need to go very personalized. So this is a bit the key message of engagement strategies. The case of demonstration area in the municipality of Suni in Sardinia. We are going to go there in just a few weeks with my colleagues in June. We have started to work with our colleagues at CNR quite a while ago. We went already through the community evaluation. Our colleagues were very helpful in facilitating us to receive all the information that we needed. We have a topic which is very dear to our colleagues and this entire demonstration area, which is controlled burning activities. So after a preliminary stakeholder analysis where we identified which are the stakeholders with which we should work in first engagement approach towards building these strategies at local level, we will go and visit our colleagues and have a first round of workshops and focus groups in the mid of June. Again, the idea here is that by applying this participatory model, we are not going there with a top-down approach. First, we gathered information from the field. We understand what are the priorities. We understood which are our stakeholders, which are our partner in crime, if you want, in order to stimulate more awareness, to stimulate citizens, communities to be more prone and to open their ears to our colleagues at CNR, firefighters, and all the other actors that are promoting the reduction of wildfire risk in the area. So more or less with this idea, with this already established points, we are going there to gather more inputs, so to consolidate this citizen scientist network in the place, but also to start the first round of awareness raising on very important issues such as the controlled burnings. And with this, I will thank you for your attention. If you need any kind of further detailed information, I am here, and I hope I didn't took too much of your time. Thank you, and now I will try to not share anymore the screen. Clelia, are we okay with time? And
thank you, Ramona. I think we're fine. I think we are okay. No worries.
Thank you for your patience.
That was amazing. Oh, wow. I must say that, yeah, we were discussing it also a bit about the citizens' engagement in our plenary meeting, but this is a challenge, bringing everybody together, trying to understand the needs and the availability, actually, what they can do in different regions and different countries of the EU. It's a great challenge. And I do believe that communities should understand that it's on their own benefit, actually. Okay, I think I cannot see any questions on the chat. There are no questions on the panel. Okay, I'm just gonna say, go ahead, because we're very happy that we are a lot here, so I cannot just open the microphones, unfortunately, but please go ahead and write your questions or any comments or any clarifications you would like to hear. Great. Any further comments from our presenters in this first thematic? Anybody would like to add something? No? Oh, Stefan, go ahead. Yeah, physically raising the hand.
If you don't mind, a question for Kiki. I really enjoyed that presentation. Really insightful. Not sure if you were here now. Yes, you are. Yeah, really great. I'm just wondering, the responses you have had, to what degree were they different within a country? In other words, how reliable, basically, or representative are those perceptions of, for example, the use of some of the techniques? Because some are allowed by law, some are not. Some are, whether you have aerial resources or not, that's easy to find out. But there are other aspects in there that may be just opinions by firefighters and may not necessarily represent the overall approach. So I just wondered if you could comment on that.
Yes, actually, the responders are coming from different regions. So let's say in Italy, we have like 3 regions that responds to these questionnaires, and every region have a different answer regarding to their maybe regulation on in their region. So such as the backburning. One region said that it is not possible to do it because it's prohibited, but other regions said it's possible. So I think the next step is that we need to validate this by the interview. So I need to interview the high level of the firefighters in Italy, and luckily we already have the contact person of that. So.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody else? Any further comment? Yes, George. No, Judith, sorry.
Yes.
George, you raised up the hand, I saw correctly?
Yes, I raised
okay,
it. Yes.
Go ahead.
Actually, I wanted to ask Ramona if there is a specific protocol for this participatory, let's say, apart from the methodology, if there is a specific protocol that can be used also in the other pilot sites of FirEUrisk. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yes, it is in the making. The whole idea of piloting this kind of approach is to come up with general guidelines at the end of the project. So there is a report, if you want, an internal guideline, which we are now going to, a protocol, as you called it. We are going to apply it in Sardinia first in June, in order to perfection it a bit, and then the idea would be to go parallelly in different pilot sites. We already took some contacts with the Portuguese pilot site, and we know we are going to work on this with ADAI. And of course, the idea would be to pilot it as much as possible across the different pilot sites. So in this sense, this is an internal note. We are definitely going to have a meeting on this after Sardinia experience. So to try to promote this this protocol, I would call it like that. I like it. Thank you for this suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward, can I ask you to write your question either on the chat or the Q&A panel?
Yes. You hear me?
You're unmuted already. Okay.
I'm not muted. I try to. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for organizing such an interesting webinar or presentation. Were really excellent. I would like to make also a reflection coming from the last question of Stefan. In that sense that, especially for those two presentations, when we try to approach issues at national level, did you consider in your research, since many countries in Europe are the competences even in fire prevention, but also in extinction are at regional level, then something very challenging is always trying to make a picture at national level. So just to have the reflection on mind and even up to what extent we can also include that regional dimension when trying to make a picture. This has obviously, for instance, in Spain, we have very different fire regimes when we are dealing with the Mediterranean side and when we are dealing with Atlantic side or mountain side. And then it's quite difficult to have a global picture at uniquely Spain. So just that was one of my comments, how you face this idea of that it's not only the Europe of the states, it's also the Europe of regions, and obviously connected with Ramona in terms of stakeholders engagement, many trust is built through the regional authorities, which see very far that, let's say, national strategies. Yeah, and the other is also, I think that it's also very interesting, try to approach more and more, even in terms of response capacity, the cross-border approach. And you know perfectly that, especially the last prevention and preparedness projects from DG ECO, especially the last 3-4 editions, they were pushing a lot for having cross-border common projects, and which is fully connected with the challenges related to extreme wildfire events, which obviously fire don't understand about the administrative boundaries. And I'm also wondering if, when analyzing the response capacity, did you also include that cross-border dimension of managing emergencies? I know that there are successful histories between Portugal and Spain, so you have very nice examples to share on that. Thank you very much. And congrats for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Edward. And okay, who wants to reply, Stefan? Or for the first comment regarding the approach and the maps and considering the European regions and different, actually mountain and sea different levels. The approach, if I understood it correct, actually, the correction.
If it is possible, Edward, to repeat specifically the question, because it was almost a statement, so the question maybe was lost.
The comment, yeah, the comment there.
Yeah, the comment was.
So if there is a specific question, it will help. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me right now? Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. So the comment was for instance, in terms of fire patterns, even in terms of response capacity, how you see the possibility of approaching also and including your research and the exposition of the results, the regional dimension beyond the states, because in some cases, when you want to make a global picture of the state, you are losing relevant information at regional level. So just to know how you face this difficulty at methodological level, because obviously we need to summarize results normally at national state, but somehow we are losing relevant information at regional state. That was how you face this difficulty.
Okay, then if it's on the responses, like first responders reaction, I will say that the question then it goes to the second presentation we had. That's correct? Yes. Kiki, do you have the, like, how do you face the different, the different, have you actually faced, that's a question, different approaches that they need to apply, the first responders, depending on the situation, on the landscape, on the location of the EU regions, not only in the EU states as general, but actually inside each of the country, the different regions and their challenges that those impose?
Actually, when I tried to deliver the questionnaire, I tried to deliver it in different region with different characteristics of landscape. But at the end, we only received like maybe not that much. So yeah, we don't get like many variety of landscape. Yeah, but like I've said before that the next step will be interview. So maybe we will get more insight from that.
All right, great. And Edward, help us out here, the second part. Was everything okay? Yeah, okay.
No, well, I mean, yeah, the reflection was the same in, for instance, Stefan, when trying to analyze the pattern of the fire, and that's all. But I don't want to spend too much time.
Okay.
I mean, there are many presentations, so.
Again, we can write also on the, just to make everything a bit more clear, write your questions, everybody, the attendees, on your Q&A and the chat, so we can go through them, and then if something is unclear, we can just repeat them, reading them through in the at the end of the sessions as well. Okay, I'm gonna give the space to Judith. She wanted to comment something, or from before. I saw your hand.
Yes, thanks. Also a quick question to Ramona. Thanks so much for the presentation. I think the whole topic of participation is really interesting. And I was wondering, based on what did you select this one municipality where you will now do the study? And do you think this could be implemented also in other municipalities in Sardinia and in Italy? Or what do you think are the what are the barriers to implementing this participatory approach? Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Well, the barriers, they are intrinsic to the challenge of participation and trying to promote sustainable engagement. But for sure, there are no obstacles in trying to promote as much as possible this model in other contexts. In fact, the model builds on quite a couple, even more decades expertise. So it is very easily adaptable and transferable as an approach by means you look at a context and you try to structure this activity or a process, a participatory process, I would say. So in that, for the last part of your question, no problems. And if there are volunteers also beyond the project, I would imagine we can cooperate and collaborate on this. Our intention is definitely to publish also once we will have our results. So for sure, that's very happy to cross-fertilize in this sense. Why Sardinia and why Suni? Well, very simply, they are part of the project. They are a demonstration area. There were very interesting aspects that qualified them as a demonstration area to begin with at the project proposal phase. And our colleagues at CNR were very much active, proactive, and wanted to bring this participatory approach in their work in trying to raise awareness and capacities of local communities on controlled prescribed burnings. So this is the very simple, there is no other criteria except for the willingness of an institutional actor, in this sense, a research actor, to take look and try to put together all that is needed to analyze this and build up a participatory process. If it will work or not, this we shall see later on in the project, but hopefully we will have good results from our work that will kick off in Sardinia in a couple of weeks. So thank you, Judith, and we are here for any further cooperation on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I will move on to the next session, and then we open the round of questions again. I will repeat myself. Just go ahead and write the questions on the panel, on the chat box, on the Q&A box. So as the presentations go along, okay, and we'll read them through afterwards. So now we're going to continue with the PyroLife, actually. And the first presenter is Judith Krishner, and the title of the presentation is Governing Wildfires, Emerging Concepts and Challenges. Judith is a PhD student in EUC, funded by the PyroLife initiative, the PyroLife program. And go ahead, Judith. Share your screen and.
Yeah. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you for the participants also for your time and for your interest. I'll quickly share my screen now. So if it's going well, maybe you can quickly.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, my name is Judith Krishner. I'm a PyroLife early stage researcher, or ESR as we are called. And I'll now give a brief overview of the PyroLife project, and then present some highlights of my research also. So here's a few hard facts basically about PyroLife. So this program started in 2019 and will be running for another year. It's also funded by Horizon 2020 and the Marie Curie program. The proposal was thought of by Professor Kathalijne Stoop at the University of Wageningen, and it came to realization with more than 20 partners in a consortium. And in the core of the project are 15 early stage researchers. So that's me here in Cyprus, for example, at the European University, and also my colleague Puja, who will present after me. Now, the main goal of this project is to train the next generation of experts to deal with the global wildfire challenge. And the idea behind that is that fire is both a tool and also a challenge in most parts of the world. And almost everything has been done before. And so it's crucial to learn from mistakes and to take advantage of what turned out as useful or as successful in different contexts. And so the ESRs working under this framework understand wildfire risk in a wider context, for example, as a function of the landscape and the socioeconomic system. And the individual projects that all the ESRs work on are covering technical and biophysical, but also lots of social projects or social drivers of wildfire risk. And to this end, the PyroLife project fosters knowledge exchange between countries and people and disciplines. And so, for example, all the PyroLife ESRs are seconded to 2 different institutions. So they get exposed to both academia and practice, and they have access to knowledge and practice in a region where they're not familiar with. And all ESRs also had to attend a number of trainings, for example, how to learn to deal with uncertainty and on how to communicate risk. And now these ideas that I just started speaking about, they are quite nicely summarized also in this illustration. So in the center, we have the idea of living with fire, which describes a status where we as a society can live both with the challenges, but also with the benefits that fire in the landscape can bring with. And this includes moving from suppression towards prevention and eventually to an adaptive state. And so the PyroLife ESRs are assigned to 3 different work packages around risk quantification, risk reduction, and risk communication. And then many of these individual projects compare fire risk management approaches across different geographic contexts. They try to learn from different types of risks, such as, for example, flooding. And they pay attention to the social setting and social diversity. So to move basically beyond this masculine boys and toys approach to fire suppression, and to draw from different types of knowledge and experiences of various sectors. And there was also recently a short video released to explain PyroLife, and I invite you to look it up on YouTube and watch it if you're interested in learning more about it. Now, to me, it still feels like this project just started, but basically it's almost coming to an end. And many of the early stage researchers now are writing up their dissertations. So do please check out the different research articles and other project outcomes that we have online. Now, this was the intro to the PyroLife project, and I'll now just share some highlights of my research for the next 10-15 minutes. So my project within the PyroLife program is about wildfire governance. And before starting about what all of that means, I just want to quickly acknowledge the support of my advisors and the contribution of my advisors. That's Dr. George Buskas here, also at the European University in Cyprus, Dr. Julian Clark at the University of Birmingham, then Dr. Peter Moore, who is now back to Australia, but who was a fire officer at the FAO before, and Dr. Davide Ascoli at the University of Turin. So how can you study wildfire governance? First of all, there's a nuanced but crucial difference between wildfire governance and wildfire management. So when I'm thinking of fire as a recurring event that happens in continuous cycles rather than just one time, then it's not a question of if there will be a fire, but when the next fire will be. And so that is why the most common approach to managing fire risk is in a management cycle, with a number of tangible plans and strategies for before, during, and after the fire. So fire management would be, for example, a law on having to maintain a defensible space around infrastructure, or plans for prescribed burning or grazing. It could be a full suppression policy, or after a fire management would describe if we wait for natural regeneration or if we start to reforest the burned area. Now, the governance system would be the broader sociocultural context wherein these management decisions are taken or made. And that includes interest and responsibility, for example, to maintain the status quo of investing in and relying on the emergency services, or if we can allocate more resources to people working and living in fire-prone territories. For example, shepherds or farmers, beekeepers, hunters, like there are actually many people who have a stake in wildfire. And so governance is about who gets to sit at the table when such decisions are made. And is that a command and control top-down approach from the state, or is responsibility shared with local residents or non-governmental groups? And researching wildfire governance is important because wildfires are, at least in Europe, often more of a social than a natural process. And we need a better understanding of how wildfire institutions, in addition to the biophysical factors, drive wildfire risk. And so the first step to my work was to do a systematic literature review to map the academic work on fire governance that has been done so far. So we searched in different databases and ended up with a literature sample of about 100 studies. And some brief key findings were that most of these studies are focused on global north countries. For example, US and Australia made up for more than half of the studies. And this could reflect a bias of where the funding is going, or also be a result of us searching for English language articles. And then most of these studies discussed wildfire governance in a more generic context without specifying in detail how the concept was used. But then we also found a lot of really promising work on the different governance concepts, and I will talk more about them now, but I first want to introduce two scholars who have been important for my work. So Dr. Elinor Ostrom was the first woman to receive the Nobel Prize in Economics. And in short, the work of her and her colleagues was about communities and the people successfully managing natural resources, because they have the biggest interest in managing them, and they would be guided by or controlled by social norms and trust and values, rather than state control or market control. And Professor Ostrom was therefore the first want to foreground the social and institutional factors in our understanding of managing the commons. And Dr. Cumming from the James Cook University in Australia is an ecologist, and he works a lot on resilience and links between the social and ecological systems. And together with his colleagues, he proposed a framework on measuring institutional structure, processes, function, context, and outcomes. And this could also be very useful in the context of understanding wildfire governance institutions. And I'll now go back to wildfire as a risk and as a process, and how the theories or concepts that are currently used can explain or help us governing the wildfire risk also. So I collected a few characteristics of wildfire as a risk here, but I don't consider this as a complete list, and it's of course up for discussion. And then the governance theories I listed here are different from top-down state control because our aim is to explore new approaches to governing and managing wildfire. So wildfire risk is transboundary, so it goes beyond political or administrative borders. And this turned out to be well addressed in multi-level or networked modes of governance. Then wildfire risk is obviously shared. Like you can have your own defensible space well maintained, but as long as your neighbors don't do the same, you might still have losses on your property. And so for this, we found lots of studies on collaborative approaches. Then wildfire risk is path depending, which means that any management decision in the past has an effect for the risk today, and also what we decide today will have an effect in the future. And like I think the most obvious example is like decisions on forest species or on tree species, like basically what vegetation do we plant and how will this have an effect in the future. And I'd say that fire risk is also rather predictable. Of course, you cannot necessarily predict an ignition, but you can anticipate high fire risk on a hot and windy summer day, and the same counts in a warm future or in areas where forests are suffering drought and bark beetle attacks. And so this requires to stay flexible by focusing on adaptive and anticipatory modes of governance. Then I would consider wildfires as inevitable. You may succeed in reducing the number of ignitions and increase the opportunities to contain a fire, but in one way or another, you will have fire in most of the systems, for example, caused by accidents. And finally, most fires, at least in Europe, they are caused by humans, and fire impact is linked to social vulnerability. And so a solution to the fire problem has to go beyond technical thinking and also has to consider social factors and communication about that. So I'll now move on to the analytical framework that we came up with based on this review. So from the studies that have been done until now, there's a great amount of ideas on how to govern wildfire as a risk and as a process. And what we did now is to sort these theories into a framework with 4 pillars. And this, I consider this as a suggestion to make future governance studies more systematic and to allow us to better describe and measure the wildfire institutions in different places. And the 4 pillars that we identified are about actor participation in decisions. And yeah, Ramona was just talking about the participation. Like, to me, participation doesn't mean that citizens have to go out and cut down trees, but it means that citizens will have to attend decision-making processes. Then it was also about what we also found is one pillar about collaboration and co-producing knowledge. And this is still said fairly general, as now we could be talking about a very local or like different geographic scales. The 3rd pillar is about path dependencies and place-based values. And the 4th one, and it has a red box because we consider it as the most promising and the most required, but also the least explored until now, is to increase adaptivity and anticipation to wildfire regimes. So now I want to share some results of a case study that we're currently preparing for submission, and where we applied this framework to explore the fire governance system in Italy. So yeah, maybe by now you're wondering why I'm based in Cyprus, but from Germany and working on this project in Italy. But again, that's because the PyroLife project really encouraged exchange across regions. And so I had the opportunity to attend a secondment at the FAO in Rome, and that's where I started working on this project. But Italy is an interesting case to study fire governance and management, and it's probably emblematic for challenges in different countries also. Because in Europe, Italy has it's the third most affected country in terms of area burned. There's actually a study of another PyroLife colleague, Sarah Meyer, who found that the estimated economic loss for a 10-year return wildfire event would be 18 to 78 million euro. And Italy is very diverse across the country in terms of landscape, climate, culture, and also fire regimes. So, for example, the north of Italy has winter fires, whereas in the south, of course, the peak fire season falls on the summer. And the National Framework Law for Forest Fire Risk Management accounts for that diversity by assigning the responsibility for fire risk management to each of these 20 administrative regions. And what's also important to know is that in 2021, Italy had a strong fire season with very large area burned. So a state of emergency was declared and a new law was implemented to improve the situation. And I will now, so yeah, in a nutshell, I'll try to keep this short for the sake of this presentation. So what we wanted to know is like, what are the different management approaches to fire risk across the regions in Italy and also on a state level? And what is the role of the broader governance system in creating or maintaining these decisions or in encouraging this paradigm change from fire suppression towards prevention? And to answer that question, we designed a questionnaire that we sent to fire experts across different stakeholder sectors in different regions. And we ended up with almost 80 sets of questionnaire responses. And here are a few of the key findings. So using the governance framework that I presented earlier on, we were able to describe the wildfire institutions in Italy. Of course, there are differences across the regions, actually really strong differences across the regions. But what we noted overall is that over the past few years, the institutional structure assigns more and more responsibility away from the region and away from the local level towards the state level. And in addition, the skills to manage fire are highly fragmented amongst various stakeholder sectors. So, for example, fire service, forest service, civil protection, municipalities, researchers, like there's a whole bunch. Now, we also noted that governance processes hardly accommodate local stakeholder participation, with some exceptions. But then again, there are various networks that do play a role in addition to the official government agencies. Then we found that on paper, the management plans are committed to a comprehensive management approach, including risk prevention and recovery, but in practice, a high reliance on suppression remains. And finally, our results point to wildfire as an issue located in the broader socioeconomic system context. So that would be about land abandonment, land fragmentation, the expanding wild and urban interface and touristic areas. But these issues are hardly addressed in management strategies. And altogether, these findings could explain why the shift in managing fire from emergency response towards a proactive approach is happening only very slowly. And so this was also reflected in the survey responses on the fire management system, where most people found preparedness and fire response, so basically the firefighting, is already very good, but it's not enough because risk prevention and mitigation are not enough, are not addressed at present, not sufficiently addressed at present. And now we see different opportunities to move forward. So to govern wildfire, it's necessary to reconsider the role of each organizational level from the local to the state. Because in the end, operational capacities, at least for prevention and not only for suppression, are mostly at the local community level. And so the state could maybe play more of a role in communicating and coordinating amongst the different regions. And there are different countries, for example, Portugal or Canada, where such a bridging agency turned out as useful. And yeah, then I think there's also potential to engage and incentivize local communities to get involved in the decision making. And then finally, what emerges from this study is the importance to widen our approach to fire as one to the system, so to anticipate fire risk and create an adaptive governance system. So to conclude, there are very different interests and responsibilities and also capacities to manage wildfire risk in local communities, in the states, and in the wider society. And looking at wildfire characteristics that more or less apply to the diverse settings wherein fires are happening, we suggest to place more emphasis on anticipating and adapting to fire risk through governance. And finally, it's important to remember that the understanding of a problem that we have will directly inform the solutions and outcomes. And so by now, maybe wildfires become more of a problem of governance rather than a problem of management. Thank you very much. And please reach out if you have questions or if you want to discuss anything.
Thank you, Judith. Great. I can hear people in the office, actually, I think. It's okay. It's normal. So, okay, I will, we are very good in time, like, but let's move on to the next presentation by Pooja. Pooja, share your screen.
Okay, thank you.
Then, as we finish this round as well with the last one from George, I'm going to open the floor for questions.
Just a second.
Yes, go ahead. No worries. Take your time. So it's great to have two of the, let's say, PhD candidates from PyroLife and the support of PyroLife in general on this. And hopefully we'll continue our collaboration with the partners, and the ladies definitely they will continue a very successful postgraduate career on wildfires. They're both very passionate about it. Okay, Pooja, go ahead.
Thank you, Clelia. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I hope you can see and hear me well.
Yes,
so
both.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Pooja Pandey, another early stage researcher from PyroLife. And my colleague Judith Kirshner, she has already, very efficiently presented what we do and what we have done. And if you have missed it, we will drop a link in the chat so you can have a look at it. And I want to also mention that just before my presentations in the first half, almost all the speakers, they briefly touched on the importance of exchange and collaboration. So without further ado, I will start my presentation on interagency exchange and wildfire management, and maybe I can define it more. So this is the outline of my presentation, where at first I will go through some definitions on interagency exchange, followed by the key components of the topic and what are the benefits and challenges of it, and some examples and best practices for interagency exchange, and further diverting my focus towards the case study of Cyprus, and finally ending it with the concluding remark. And I know it looks a little bit lengthy, but actually it is not, and I will not take a lot of time. So interagency exchange, it is a widely used term in many sectors, such as healthcare, education, and also wildfire, as I see now. And it still does not have a definite definition. And however, I feel that, basically they all mean the same in different contexts, but they all have like similar definitions. And here I have put a few definitions which are relevant to my research. So as per the definition mentioned here, interagency exchange is mutually beneficial and well-defined relationship entered into by two or more organizations to achieve a common goal. And basically, these are the outcomes of social learning that are built upon the trust and cooperation of the group of collaborators. And because I asked a question, what is known about this topic and how will we know when we see it? How are we going to know if we have a better or efficient interagency exchange? So we can see effective exchange and collaboration in wildfire management through these key components, which includes communication, because having an open communication channel, or open about one's thought, It will promote healthy exchange and information sharing. And many scholars that that I have came across in the literature review section of my paper, I've seen that they have explained communication as the exchange of information and ideas between two or more agencies. And what I found out during my research is that communication can easily be achieved when when trust is there. So also, I found that scholars have argued that trust puts the stakeholder in an exposed situation because the truster believes that the person or the organization is competent or open and concerned, and they can trust them. So while trust also reduces the amount of time and effort required to exchange and collaborate, it also creates sort of problem, because if you're putting trust into some organization or a personnel, then maybe you will work a bit less. I'll explain it in the later part of my presentation. Next up is leadership, so which is also a critical component in this context of wildfire management, because as a good leader is the one who can establish clear goals, communicate effectively, build trust and relationship, and facilitate the coordination and collaboration among various stakeholders. And because interagency exchange, it simply means, involves more than one authority. It should have vision, and it should also have goal agreements. And it also becomes, much more valuable tool for an effective collaboration. Here are also some of the screenshots of a few papers that discusses different components of interagency exchange and collaboration. So if you want to have a look, please do. Next is, in order to understand the benefits and challenges of interagency exchange, I believe we must consider the why, how, what, and who, and in which the why focuses on the reasons that interagency is beneficial, which I will discuss in the next section. And the how discusses how it can be achieved, addressing the key components we just discussed, and what we will achieve. Additionally, who comprises of the representatives of key stakeholders, including the decision makers. It includes the decision makers to improve the wildfire management strategies, or as the goal of the PyroLife project is to learn to live with the fire, because we must face this harsh reality, as mentioned by one of the scientists, and I quote, "We cannot eliminate wildfires, and we can decide where and how and who burns the wildfire. So we need to accept the risk and learn to live with fires." And as I've been saying too many times and already too much about interagency exchange, refer to the process of sharing information, resources, and expertise between different government agencies or organizations. We should also consider what are the benefits. If we're doing it, then we must also consider the benefits of doing it and also consider the challenges. So I will go through the benefits first. So interagency exchange, it can improve coordination between different agencies and organizations, enabling them to work together more effectively to achieve common goals, as I already mentioned. And second is it can also lead to increased efficiency, because by sharing resources and expertise, agencies can operate more efficiently and effectively by reducing duplication of efforts and resources. And it could also result in enhanced collaboration between different agencies, promoting a more collaborative and integrated approach to problem solving, which then lead to better decision making, as sharing information and expertise can help agencies to make more informed and evidence-based decision. And finally, interagency can also help agencies provide better services to the public by leveraging the strengths and capabilities of each organization. But to achieve this beautiful picture where all the agencies are working together in harmony, we will have to look into and solve the barriers to effective interagency exchange, which includes these following points. So first and most commonly discussed is the communication barrier, because different agencies may use different terminology and communication styles, making it challenging to communicate effectively and have a common ground. And some agencies may be, resistant to change that I've seen here in Cyprus, which I will also talk about later. So they are resistant to change, but they also, could be just hesitant to share information or resources. And if we talk about the organizational culture and conflicting priorities and resource constraints, because some agencies may have limited resources, making it challenging to engage in the exchange activities. To understand this, if you're talking about interagency exchange, and I do not mention a national interagency fire center, I feel incomplete, because this is a good example of an agency which supports several wildfire fighting agencies. And through this, the decisions to tackle wildfire problems are made with the cooperation from all of them, and not just one agency, which is a good practice, as I think, and it promotes knowledge sharing and open channel for communication for everybody to put their ideas forward. There's also one of the examples from the FireWise communities in Italy, which promotes collaboration between homeowners, local agencies, and fire departments. There are also several research projects in Europe, such as the Cost Action, and many more. I'm not just saying that it is the only one. It also promotes interdisciplinary cooperation and collaboration in wildfire management, like the project that I'm also involved in. And this network basically includes scientists, policymakers, and practitioners from different countries, and supports research and exchange of best practices related to wildfire management. Moving on to the best practices, which includes the key components that I discussed. And I feel it varies from case to case basis. So we now jump onto the case study of Cyprus to know more about it. All right. Cyprus, as you all might be aware of, is a small Mediterranean island with a complex socio-political situation. And the divided nature of the country hinders the effective management of wildfires, because the responsibility for managing the environment and natural resources falls under different authorities, and who often, have limited coordination and collaboration. So in order to understand what needs improvement, or what can be changed, we must fully understand the strategies being considered to manage wildfires in a region. So in Cyprus, Forest Department is solely responsible for prevention preparedness, while fire services, volunteers, and private sectors like NGOs also help in response and recovery. So the Department of Forests' main objective is to prepare and to terminate the fire caused by human influence. And this is accomplished by enforcing forest law, public engagement through education, formation of picnic areas and camping areas. So if we have such a picture-perfect scenario in Cyprus, with all the distributed responsibilities and having one authority look into the prevention and preparedness, where are we lacking? Maybe in collaborating with one another. So this is my case study that I did, and in the interviews that I did with the personnel involved in wildfire management in Cyprus, it was found that there are several hindrances that impede effective collaboration and exchange, such as the listed factors as availability of resources, which also includes, lack of personnel, equipment, funding, and also the use of advanced technology. And then is the employment employee training, or employment training in wildfire management. So personnel training and situation awareness, which are crucial factors in exchange, because it will help them to take proactive steps to collaborate and exchange knowledge to manage wildfires, or maybe just respond quickly and effectively if a fire does occur. However, not all of them receive the same sort of training to have a similar approach to tackle wildfire issue, which leads to differences in opinion, which is not a wrong point to have, differences in opinion, but then they will have different way to approach the problem, and they might not, collaborate on the problem before, and that might create a problem during a wildfire event. And then is the organizational collaboration, and we will, at least I will agree that collaboration is important. And no, I mean, everybody agrees because we've been talking about it for so long. And I feel because working together, organizations, they can share information about the area most at risk of wildfires, which will also allow them to coordinate the allocation of resources, such as firefighting equipment and personnel. But I mentioned, I saw in Cyprus, the Department of Forest is solely responsible for the prevention and preparedness activities. So there is no such collaboration with other agencies in that part, at least. So many, excuse me, many of the interviews, they also mentioned that there must be a governing body that brings all the stakeholders under one roof, and and discuss the plan and the ways ahead before a wildfire strike. Additionally, I've also found in the wildfire literature that much attention, and we've been talking about it today also, that community engagement is important, and it is also a point of concern in Cyprus, because with the people that I spoke to, it was evident that it is not just responsibility, or it is not just one side approach, because if the officials want to involve community, the community is resistant, and vice versa. So in short, there are not a lot of community involvement in managing wildfires. I mean decision-making processes. And it is important because it involves active participation and collaboration between the relevant authorities, such as firefighting agencies and local governments, to collaborate and communicate in order, to promote responsible behavior towards reducing the risk of wildfires. So I already briefly explained how these identified barriers can, benefit interagency exchange in my previous slide. Here, I would like to go a little more into depth in order to, improve this exchange. What we need, what are the solutions? I think the solution is to break the silos, because no agency can work alone to achieve an integrated approach. Integration means involving everybody. And exchange is must, and communication and other components that I mentioned earlier are the key to approach the extreme wildfire issue. And all of this can be achieved by establishing clear roles and responsibilities for each agencies involved, and by developing a common operating picture to ensure all parties have access to the same information, and also having real communication and information sharing between agencies. Also, which is one of the most important point, is to conduct joint training and exercises to enhance coordination and response capabilities. And then is conducting after action reviews to identify lessons learned and areas for improvement. We always talk about, lessons learned and lessons that could be implemented in further studies, but these lessons need to be integrated, and we need a science and practice interaction, so that if we are proposing, for example, if a researcher or a scientist is proposing something, you must look into it and not just saying that they're just approaching it from one way. And it could be also a joint collaboration with science and with practitioners, and it is going to benefit to, establishing a joint incident command system to ensure a unified approach to wildfire response. So in conclusion, I would just add that interagency exchange is crucial for effective wildfire management. And while there are challenges to collaboration and exchange, the benefits always outweigh the cost. So it is high time that we look into it. And I mean, we are looking into it, but we also need to act on it. And with this, I stop here. Thank you very much for listening. If you would like to discuss more about my research or on this topic, please get in touch with me through my email ID or simply connecting with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Yeah, Pooja had the pleasure of trying to discuss an interview. As she said, she did interview actually the Forest Department and the Fire Brigade sometimes, and some other, let's say, policy and stakeholders, policy reviewers, stakeholders in Cyprus. Language was a barrier there, but yeah, all good. Very nice research and results that the whole island actually will benefit and its communities, along with Pooja, of course, for her PhD and knowledge. Okay, now let's move on to George. Yes, George, I will share your presentation. You will be telling me when to change slides.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
now
you.
You have to confirm with me that you see this.
Yeah. I can see it. So I will briefly talk about a review that we have made in context of FirEUrisk concerning the fire management policies in different countries of the European Union. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, talking about the wildfire management, the policy framework comprises different policies, including international policies, European Union policies, national policies, but also regional policies. Regional policies not only by means of policies related to landers or in Germany or autonomies in Spain, but also as regulations that are issued in regions of the member states of the European Union member states. If we go to the next slide then. Okay, concerning the international policies, we can focus to the Sendai framework, which is a framework that was initiated by United Nations. It is actually a 15 years framework started in 2015, which is a kind of international agreement focusing to reducing the risks in general, the disaster risk, and we can consider this framework and actually the different policies of the European Union, also national policies, are aligned to this framework. In particular, for our case concerning the wildfires, the four main priorities that are set by the Sendai framework are related to understanding the risk, strengthening the risk governance, investing in risk reduction, and enhancing the preparedness of the society and the countries in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. The Sendai framework is related with several other international agreements like the Paris Agreement or the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. But in particular, concerning wildfires, the Sendai framework, the policies related to Sendai framework consider the development of early warning systems, improved land use and forest management practices, engagement of the community, adaptation to climate change, and also there are national risk reduction policies that are already issued and which comply with the Sendai framework. Let's go to the next slide now. Okay, so from the international policy, we can go to the key European Union policies and instruments. Actually, there are some policies and some instruments that help or support the implementation of these policies, and also groups, in particular groups of experts that are linked to this implementation of the European policies. The main EU policies include the EU Forest Strategy for 2030, which focus to the increase of fire prevention and also to make the European forest resilient to climate change. Also, the EU Green Deal policy, which was adopted in 2019, which aims to make the European Union climate neutral by 2050. In Green Deal are included in a range of measures that are related to wildfire management, including the restoration of degraded ecosystems, and also the promotion of sustainable land use practices. The EU strategy on adaptation to climate change is the part related to adaptation, where fire also plays a role. This was adopted in 2021 and outlines the way that the European Union will adapt to the impact of the climate change, trying to make the forest and the environment resilient to climate change, also promote nature-based solution and promote climate-proofing investment, and also to improve the knowledge and monitoring the adaptation to climate change through the European Climate Adaptation Knowledge System. There are some funding instruments like the European Regional Development Fund, which provide wildfire prevention and risk management funding to support these policies. And there is also the Common Agricultural Policy, which provides support for agroforestry and the development of fire-resilient landscape in order to improve the resilience of the European landscape to wildfires. These are more or less the main policies and the instruments that exist. And there are also operational instruments like the EU Civil Protection Mechanism, that is the mechanism of the European Union to support the member states for the civil protection needs and requirements that have beyond the capabilities and the capacities at the national level, which since 2019 is upgraded to the FirEUrisk, which established a new European reserve, which include firefighting planes and helicopters mainly. It has also other dimensions, but the main part of FirEUrisk is related to fire suppression capacity and capabilities of the European Union in order to support the member states to their needs. Also, different infrastructures related to supporting decision making, like the European Forest Fire Information System, the Copernicus Emergency Management Services are part of the policies, as well as the rapid damage assessment and the rapid mapping of the European Commission, are infrastructures that help and support the implementation of the relevant policies of the European Union. And another way to support these policies is through specific groups of experts, like the expert group for forest fires, which is re-established actually in 2018. It was before implementing in a different way, but they have make it more executive and operational, let's say, after 2018, which is a group that support the European Union effort to prevent and manage forest fire, and also to review the policies and the trends, the policies, and determine which way the European Commission should address and respond to the different issues and challenges according to the actual reality. In the next slide. Okay, now the civil protection and humanitarian aid directorate expresses the central European Union policy and strategy for wildfire management. This is the last initiative that is presented in this slide of DG ECHO, the European Union Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Directorate. This is the last initiative that they have, in which they propose for the for the member states the development of wildfire prevention action plans. This is an initiative taken in 2022, and in this plan, they consider aligned to the priorities and the context of Sendai framework. They consider they organize in three different groups the capacities that the National Prevention Action Plan should support. One is related to the improved capacity to prevent wildfires. A second is to the improvement of knowledge on wildfires to improve prevention. And the third group is related to the increased financing of wildfire prevention action. So they consider these three groups of activities and the policies that are related to the implementation of these activities. The first focusing to capacity, the second focusing to the knowledge, and the third focusing to finances. If you see the first point of these 10 points, let's say, statement concerning the wildfire prevention action plan development is related to strengthening the capacity building through targeted peer reviews on wildfire prevention and preparedness. This is the first point that DG ECHO supports or tries to support, because this is an ongoing process. And if we go to the next slide, this is what they have developed right now, or this is what they try to develop in order to apply in the different member states, is to develop a wildfire peer review assessment framework. So this is a framework to review and assess the national prevention plan that we have seen in the previous slide. This is work in progress, corresponding to the point 1 of the 10 points of the new prevention action plan mentioned before. And it includes this peer review framework. It includes the governance to reduce the risk, the way to assess the risk through risk identification, analysis, evaluation, and communication, the risk assessment planning through the definition of roles, priorities, monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and policy coherence. All these elements are related to policies, and this is the reason that are mentioned here. Concerning risk prevention measures, in relation to land planning, structural measures, nature-based solution, public awareness and communication, risk preparedness, including contingency planning, early warning systems training exercises and new capacities, emergency response by means of containment of wildfires, rescue operations, relief operations, business continuity and response coordination, and also recovery and lessons learned, which includes recovery plans and also lessons learned and build back better in relation to business continuity mentioned before. So each plan should or the review framework for assessing the national plan will have these seven chapters, let's say, these seven aspects that will be considered in context of the peer review assessment. This is something that it is an initiative, a policy initiative of DG ECO, in which FirEUrisk is somehow represented in the expert group that works on this peer review assessment framework, and it is something that we extend, trying to involve the DG ECO in the cooperation with the research projects, in particular FirEUrisk, and this is the reason that this is included also in a workshop that FirEUrisk, together with some other projects under the umbrella of FireLog, will organize at the end of May in Rhodes, in Greece. If we go to the next slide. Okay, now after the part concerning the international and the European policies, there is a work related to the identification of the situation concerning the national wildfire policies. Let's go to the next slide. So the approach that and the methodology that we have considered in FirEUrisk in order to implement this work through mostly through a survey to the countries participating in the consortium of FirEUrisk. It includes a review of information on legal and policy documents and also literature that exists. The first part is related to contacts with different partners, but also different entities with whom we have collaboration. The second step is the collection of national and regional information from consortium partners through properly focused questionnaires, statistical and qualitative assessment of the feedback that we have gathered through the questionnaires, and also through the FirEUrisk webinars related to the national organization of wildfire management. And finally, the last step is a study and analysis of relevant case studies at the national and regional level. Next slide. Okay, so the main ways to collect information related to legislation, policies and strategies, and also the organizational structure and the investment policy related to wildfire management in the different countries in order to elaborate to merge and elaborate this information from the different countries and develop and deliver recommendations to policy integration. In the next slide, Also, okay. So the way that the survey was made, it was organized in a way to collect information related to organization, legislation, policies, and investment, and as we have seen in the previous slide, and identify for each of these elements the authority level, the jurisdiction level, and also the stage of the stage of the wildfire management in the chain of wildfire management. That means if the organization participate in prevention, suppression, or restoration, at which level of authority, and what is the relevant jurisdiction for each organization. The same is in the same way we examine and we collect information concerning legislation, policies, and investments. Next slide. This is an example from Portugal. This is in this slide we see information related to the organization. We collected information which organization under which authority acting at which level and involved in which of the three stages of wildfire management. So we tried to make the geography, let's say, of the involvement of the different organizations in the different stages, and also to depict their responsibilities and role. Apart from the organization, in the next slide, we can see similar information again from Portugal concerning legislation, a collection of relative laws that are applied by a certain authority at a different level between local, regional, or national in prevention, response, and restoration. In the next slide, we also collected information concerning policies with a similar approach, identifying to which subject is related the specific policy, which is the authority that is responsible for the application, at which level and in which stage of the wildfire management. And the fourth, in the next slide, picture slide shows information that we have collected concerning funding of wildfire management activities in order to identify what was mentioned before related to the impression that exists, which is not only impression that most of the funding goes to the fire suppression rather to prevention of the fires. Next slide. Okay, so the national welfare-related policies based on the information that was collected is dispersed in different individual policies which are related to forest and vegetation management, land planning and development, fire prevention and education, fire suppression, post-fire recovery, cross-jurisdictional coordination, and also climate change. The next slide. Okay, so the core wildfire management policies in the member states of the European Union, based on the feedback from the survey, are focusing to wildfire prevention measures, early detection and monitoring systems, firefighting organization, and post-fire recovery measures. This is somehow the way that they are described in the feedback that we have received. And pay attention that concerning prevention and concerning recovery, the policies focus to measures, while for monitoring, they are talking for systems, for firefighting, they are talking about organization. So there is no the concept and the approach of the organization for the prevention or for the restoration, but rather individual and dispersed measure to address the problem that already exists, and not which way we can prevent and organize in an integrated way the whole wildfire management. In the next slide. Thank you, Clelia. So the wildfire management policy and organization, based on the feedback that we received, has shown us that there are differences between Northern and Southern European Union countries, differences between forest and fire service management approach, also centralized versus regional and federal organization of wildfire management, and also differences due to differences in forest ownership. Actually, we can go to the next slide to save time. And so we have identified that in the southern countries where there is high risk of wildfires, like in Portugal, Spain, or Greece, there are more extensive regulation and requirements for wildfire prevention, including restrictions on outdoor burning, bans on certain activities during the fire season, mandatory evacuation plans that are currently under reform for the communities at risk. So we can say that in the southern countries, the wildfire prevention is fire-centered and also law enforced by law. In the northern countries with lower wildfire risk, for example, in Denmark, Sweden, Netherlands, the regulations are less extensive related to wildfire prevention, focusing more on general forest management practices and education and awareness campaigns to promote responsible behavior. So we have identified the forest-centered and human factor inclusive approach, which is something missing in the southern countries. In any case, we can say that this is also due to the situation, at least in the past, because having the fire as a main threat for local communities, the southern countries were obliged to adopt and to use these fire-centered and law enforcing approaches, while without being such a risk and threat in the northern countries, they focused more on forest management and also the human factor involvement in the management of the forest and the prevention from the different threats, including wildfire. Next slide. So more or less from the feedback, we made a rough classification in 4, let's say, groups, one for the Southern Europe, one for Eastern Europe, for Central Europe, Northwest, the Atlantic Europe, and Northern Europe. In these 5 groups, the most you go from the first to the last bullet, you have more related to forest and more preventative policies and strategy, which is related to the fact that we said before that all these policies and these approaches are based on the situation that existed till now, and maybe this will change, or the landscape will change in the future, also due to the climate change. In the next slide. Okay, so the challenges and gaps identified and or confirmed by the survey is that there is a fragmented responsibility concerning wildfire management. There is a landscape fragmentation, including the wild and urban interface areas. funding, the allocation of funding, and the missing of long-term investments for wildfire management. They work on an annual basis, which is something that is inadequate for managing wildfires. The inadequate coordination between the different agencies. It was mentioned also before, this lack of communication. It is not only the language. There are operational and organizational conflicts, and in almost all the countries, it is very difficult to have two different institutions or organizations involved in wildfire management to cooperate smoothly between them. Other challenges related to climate change impact. The perception of risk from the citizen is another issue, in particular in regions with touristic activity, and also knowledge sharing, even between scientific, let's say, communities, is not very well organized. Next slide. Again, the challenges that have been identified through the surveys, the lack of multi-annual national fuel management programs, the exclusion of fire. There is a policy excluding the fire, although it has started the last year to be revised in Europe, which is not the case in the United States. The lack of European Union policies for fire use as a management tool, the monitoring of land use change at the regional scale, inadequate wildfire management policy integration in other policies, and also missing standardization for wildfire management plans. Next slide. Okay, this is the last slide that I have in order to give you this information. As I mentioned before, all these issues related to policies and strategies related to wildfire management, the current situation and what can be done better, will be discussed in a workshop in Rhodes, as I mentioned before, and where we have these three panels related to the holistic approach and integrated management of landscape wildfires. A second panel related to National Wildfire Prevention Action Plan and the peer review framework of DG ECO that I presented before, and also a science and technology contribution panel session from the projects like FirEUrisk, but also the Green Deal projects and other wildfire-related projects to discuss which way they can contribute to the topics of these three panels. I have finished. I will close just saying that because it was mentioned also in this webinar sometimes, the issue is not to move